You know, it really warms my heart because your interest in corporate social responsibility and public relations with a purpose shows that even at this early stage in your career, you are already thinking about how to use your PR skills for good. So I'm Dr. Kay Sweetser, and this webinar is being hosted by the Glenn Broome Center for Professional Development in Public Relations in partnership with PRSSA National. Dr. Glenn Broome was considered the professor of the profession because he literally wrote the textbook in public relations. Nearly every single PR practitioner still has this textbook, Effective Public Relations, on his or her desk today. Dr. Broome taught at San Diego State University for more than 30 years, and he focused on improving the profession by improving the people within it. Now, that same approach is how the Broom Center carries on the legacy of Dr. Broome. So we continue his work to elevate the profession. And we find the best way to do that is to invest in you, the people of public relations, the people who are out there using your initiative, hustling, and showing grit. So the Broom Center invests in you by offering great webinars like this one we're going to have today, supporting PRSSA students by paying the fee for the Certificate in Principles of Public Relations, and offering networking opportunities. And hey, you know what? If you have some other ideas about how we can invest in you, then just ask. So building on this topic today of giving back and keeping in line with our values at the Broom Center to invest, we're going to invest in you and your PRSSA chapters today. So at the end of the webinar, I'm going to announce an awesome little fundraiser that we've done, and there'll be one chapter that will get a donation from the Broom Center, and then we're also going to give away several different PRSSA memberships for people who said they weren't yet members of PRSSA. So make sure that you stay all the way through the end. Now, I am going to encourage you to share your outtakes from today on social media. Please use the hashtag 3P Career Tour or tag @Broom Center to join in the conversation. I'll put all of that in the chat in a moment. Our panel is going to start as a moderated conversation, and then we're going to open it up to QA. So when you have a question, type it in the QA box as opposed to the chat, so that we can cover as many topics as possible today. We're not going to spend a long time doing an introduction for the panelists, but I encourage you to download the speaker packet, which will be linked in the chat just a moment here. There you're going to find out all about their careers, their social media handles, and you can also connect with them on LinkedIn. So if you have any questions, type them in the Q&A box. Now, our moderator today is going to be Scott Pansky. He co-founded Allison+Partners, and he was also a student of Dr. Broome's. Scott knows a thing or two about the topic today because he's actually the social impact lead for his firm, Allison+Partners. So welcome, Scott, and I can't wait to see what you have lined up for us.
Thanks, Dr. Sweetser, and thank you for pulling this all together. Everyone, it's our pleasure to be here today. We have a great group of panelists, and if I can have each of you come onto the screen, that would be great. What we're going to do is, over the next hour, I'm going to ask a series of questions that we've received from you. Students from all over the country and even in South America have presented questions to us. I'm going to frame them for our speakers, and we'll really talk about purpose and social impact for maybe about half an hour, 45 minutes. And then from there, we'll talk about how to get careers in social impact and kind of the career track that these folks have taken. As Kay said, all of their bios are in the materials that were presented ahead of time. So we're not going to go into deep introductions, but they will share some stories from the field and things that they've done as they respond to some of these questions. So the first question comes to us from Kristen Yabumuto from Sacramento State University, and it's really a good place for us to start. What is social impact PR? Debbie, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Scott. So I think we need to take a step back and and think about purpose. So when you think about a company like Coca-Cola, so purpose first is why you exist, right? So if you think like a company with Coca-Cola, it's to sell beverages, and the most famous one being Coca-Cola. But we have a myriad of beverages, from waters to juices, etc. But how that manifests itself into the company purpose is to refresh the world and make a difference. And then the offshoot of that is the manifestations in the local community to ensure that we're doing the things that entail both having a better shared future. So Scott, as I think about that question, I think it really has to go back to why a company exists, and then going into doing better in the communities they operate. And the PR piece is merely just telling the stories and communicating that good, not necessarily, fabricating anything, not like that, right? So it's just ensuring that you're doing good, and whatever in that business will have to be tied to those actions. But I think ultimately that social impact PR can't be an offshoot. It has to be integrated into the overall purpose for the organization. To ensure that it's not merely just a story, that there's some meat and reality to that.
That's awesome. Sally, can you expand on that a little bit in regards to the different stakeholders that an organization like Warner Brothers has to appease to, from internal and external?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question, only because when we talk about social impact PR, I don't know that we ever put those words together in the first place, right? Because it was like, you have a brand and it exists separately. But I think what consumers, your question about stakeholders, whether it's your audience, consumers, internal employees, what they all care about now is, how does the company I support, whether with my dollars or because it's where I work, reflect the values that I care about? And I think that's the positive trend, that we're even here talking about social impact PR, social impact, social justice, whatever you want to call it. I think it's important to realize that there is a community of stakeholders that that touch your brand in some way, and what they all want to know is, what do you stand for?
And Nijha, Smile Train is a global brand. How do you keep kind of your social impact mission alive in front of everybody? It's consistent.
Sure. Well, really at Smile Train, everything we do is very purpose driven. Not only do we have the sole purpose of providing free cleft care to individuals in need, we're also really driven by the purpose of supplying local medical communities around the globe with the support and training they really desperately need through our Teach a Man to Fish model. And this model really provides sustainability and empowerment where it's needed the most. And one thing I just wanted to add also is, social impact in PR is very important. There's no wrong or right time to do something well or do something good for someone, especially now during a pandemic. We find that it's, whether it's from the impact of campaigns on our various target audiences, and helping to kind of really deliver genuine CSR programs while we're encouraging workforce diversity and so on and so forth. So all of these various communication industry really does play a huge role.
So, let's play off of what Nijha was just sharing. Riley Carr at San Diego State University asked, how is social impact PR applies in today's society? When you look at COVID-19 and Black Lives Matter, how have your brands addressed these issues? Why don't we start, Sally, with you this time?
Sure. So just for clarity, because I know there's been a lot of change at our company, but our parent company is AT&T, and under that, we're a newly kind of formed identity under Warner Media, which includes Warner Brothers, HBO, and Turner. And obviously, we occupy the world of media and entertainment, and we recognize that our role is as an influencer, right? We are the ones that craft the content that you all tune into. And so I think in terms of understanding our role. First, of course, there's going to be the philanthropic donations to organizations that we really believe can carry out our mission. But I think the company is really taking a look internally to understand in all of our different lanes, whether it's how we hire people in front of the camera, behind the camera, the corporate employees, like what are we doing to make sure that that representation exists? And I think the greatest game changer, and I've talked about this in other avenues, is that we hired on a chief enterprise inclusion officer in Christy Halbecker, who comes over from CAA. And she was hired to take on that role, but recently her role has increased to also include marketing and communications. So for those of you who've been in the CSR space, as we all know, CSR is typically tucked under marketing, communications, maybe HR or legal, but to now have somebody who is a leader in the space owning those functions and saying it's going to be how we talk about our business, I think is huge. And so I look forward to what kind of this pivot will look like for our industry and our company.
Awesome. Debbie?
Yeah, I think, COVID has taught us that being flexible is so important now more than ever. So as you think about Coca-Cola, a lot of people think, oh, global company, and that's kind of it. But we're super local. We hire local folks, we procure local ingredients. So the communities that prospering also benefits us. There's a reciprocal symbiotic relationship in that. And I think understanding that allows us to have, those local pieces to have vested interests in those communities. So what that means is during COVID, as an example, we create products and some of them are in plastic bottles, right? So one of the ways that we helped is, okay, we donated plastic for face shields. We help procure PPE, right? So those are the tangible pieces that local communities may need. And it varied per community because as you all may know, the pandemic is having ebbs and flows across the globe. So the needs may vary and probably will fluctuate, but at the same time, ensuring flexibility was key to support the communities in a way that would be beneficial, pertinent, and it allowed us to speak to those communities, right, at a local level. So I think with the pandemic and the global nature of it, I think it still allows us to have a lot of opportunities for those local touch points to ensure that whatever we're doing, whether that's monetary donations to organizations or actual tangible actions, that it is what is needed for those communities.
And Nijha, you're a nonprofit. It's a little bit different, but you have a lot of stakeholders yourselves that you have to address these types of issues with. How's Smile Train done that?
Sure. I just want to take one step back and then I'll answer that question. The consensus between Sally and Debbie, one of the things specifically for nonprofits, as you can imagine, it hits our work very, very hardly. For COVID-19, it also really offers a great opportunity for businesses and nonprofits to really shift, as Debbie mentioned, to shift towards like more genuine and authentic CSR. And it really helps to contribute to address like urgent social challenges or environmental challenges, just depending on what your line of work is. Specifically for Smile Train, the pandemic actually hit our programs, our local programs, pretty heavily. But we as an organization had to shift to really hone in on what are the key components of our business and how do we continue to provide the services and the care that our patients desperately needed. So we shifted towards a lot of telehealth, finding opportunities to still do our comprehensive cleft care through speech therapy, and as an example. But yeah, I think from a business model, you really just have to learn. I think Debbie mentioned that, is being able to adapt and to shift so that you are staying grounded to your core mission and your values, all while still trying to do your day-to-day work.
It makes a lot of sense. I think it's a really interesting time frame because so many brands have had to pivot Can you kind of share any stories that you may have had of a campaign that you're working on that you had to pivot, any kind of partnership or program even internally with your employees that you might be able to share? Throw that out. We'll start with Nijha this time.
Okay, sure. Yes. I think there was a lot of pivoting. So for an example, in the month of October, there's a special day, which is the first Friday of every month, which is called World Smile Day. And Smile Train has been participating in World Smile Day, which is all about acts of kindness and just making the world, smile. This year was very different, where we had to pivot an in-person event, which we've been doing over the course of the years, to a virtual event. So very last minute, we shifted to it being a virtual event. We were able to secure quite a few celebrity guests. Sierra actually hosted our event. And it was really, really a group effort. I mean, I think, if it wasn't for the team, it would have been very challenging to shift in such a quick period of time. But we made it work. We found that this was actually one of our most successful World Smile Days, where we find that most people are looking for things to do, right? So we've all as a world have pivoted, where we are used to doing in-person face-to-faces, but now having to shift to more online and virtual, as we all are here today doing a virtual panel. And it does sometimes lose authenticity. Sometimes it does lose the interest level, but finding those ways to really adapt and to engage with your audiences is very key.
Sally, the entertainment industry has been hit really interesting over the period of time, from even how we show a film, whether it's going to be on TV and the theater at the same time. What are some kind of pivots you've seen with your company?
Oh, so many. I'm sure you could read the trades this week and that probably answers all. And I'm not going to answer those questions because that's for our PR folks to figure out. I think from a community engagement and CSR lens, I think because we're just all used to being scrappy, we saw this as another opportunity to be innovative. And last year, as one case in point, we had launched as an industry what was known as the Veterans in Entertainment Summit. And my thought was, all of the studios are doing something in the veteran recruitment space, but what would it be like to kind of bring everybody together to sort of eventize it, but at the same time, like highlight best practices. So it creates that motivation for others to kind of invest more in this work. So last year, we huge success. We had it at the local Hollywood Post. American Legion serviced about 150 military members from the LA, San Diego community. And everyone's like, this is great. We should do it again. 2020. And I'm like, what are we going to do? We're grounded. And I thought there's no reason that this content still couldn't be salient, right? What we're trying to do is teach people about our industry and sort of demystify that the only jobs available are in front of the camera as an actor, or maybe behind the camera as a director, that there's a whole creative economy. So we had more corporate sponsors. We had folks like LinkedIn jump on, for example, because they're huge in the veterans space. And we hosted a 2-day virtual summit, 12 hours of content programming between pre-recorded and live. And last year was 150 veterans. This year we had well over 850 registered, 500 participated live. Awesome. On demand, 45 states, 5 countries. And we included military spouses, which has been a population that has been underserved. So I think there's always opportunity if we're willing to see it. And I think the key in all of our endeavors is the intentionality.
Awesome. Thank you. Debbie.
Yeah, we have hundreds of brands, and I'd say that we have planned out these plans way in advance. So that means that when COVID happened, all these plans were now, what do we do, right? And each of these brands are articulated differently. They have different personalities. They're just different in their own right. They have their own DNA. So an example of kind of some of those pivots. So we have a lot of partnerships with sports organizations, I think, as an example, and concerts, etc. So we had all this product, right? So what we did is we just reached out to all our community partners, from Feeding America to hospitals, just to say, hey, if you can we offer this to you? And then did that. But it's just ensuring, again, back to that flexibility, things are just moving and changing so quickly that it's now, I feel as if just common operations to ensure that you have a plan A to a plan Z, to ensure that you have the ability to pivot and ensure that you can continue getting the objective done. Because there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be things that you're going to have to do. But that small example of, okay, we have all this product, concerts aren't happening, and sporting events weren't happening at the time. So, we took a step back and we knew that we could, somebody could find use for this. So that's one example that took a Herculean effort, just because, these local engagements, there's a lot. And there's one-on-one conversations, but it's ensuring that we are supporting in a way that would be impactful.
Sure, hours and hours of time to make that work. I'm going to pull together 3 questions into one from our students here, and bear with me as I ask it. We're going to take a step back from COVID and current issues, but in developing campaigns. One is Ariel Bass from Louisiana State University, and she asked, how do you manage social consciousness while working for huge corporate brands? And then I'm going to add to that from Leah Darencourt at Emerson College, how do we ensure that the impact that the brands make are not merely performative? And from Becca Logan at the University of Alabama, or braggative? So this goes really to the question of, how do you build those partnerships in an authentic and transparent way? Why don't we start, Debbie, with you, and we'll work our way around.
Scott, you and I were talking earlier about relationships, right? So relationships are just so key, because I think when you invest the time, not just the money, but the time to understand the problems that you're trying to solve together, then there is a respect that happens in folks really understanding that you're serious about, whatever you guys are partnering together with. So I think it really, it gets down to just ensuring that you're not just doing it, for the pat on the back. And I think big organizations like Coke and Warner Brothers and other corporations, they have strategic guidance visions. And I think that allows us to ensure that whatever said CSR thing is happening, that it's in line with what we're trying to do as an organization, that it's not this one-off thing. And I think with that framework in mind, so me as one individual in a gigantic company like Coke, I would say that, I understand what we're all working against. So at least I have a frame of reference when having a conversation about said topic or said, opportunity, to ensure that the folks, the cross-functional group of folks that are working through said topic, that we challenge each other, but we have a North Star to go against.
Can you provide any example of a specific type of case study across any brand? And that's probably something else to differentiate. So you have Coke as the master brand, and so you have your own CSR platform for what Coke stands for, but then there's some different messaging associated with a brand within the family.
So one example is Sprite, right? So Sprite and Coke are very different, but Sprite is about empowering creators, and really that community is serving, I would say, predominantly the African American community. So if that's the case, then how it articulates its purpose is going to be much different in terms of just the financial even donations, right? That brand would do relative to a Coca-Cola. They're not separate, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they're separate, but what said brand focuses on will be dependent on what that brand's kind of just core strategy is. But I think ultimately, any brand within the Coca-Cola family, we all ladder up to that purpose of refreshing the world and making a difference. How that manifests itself will vary per brand based on that brand identity.
Thank you. Sally, you mentioned earlier how small Warner Brothers is, and its line of families. Obviously, it's huge, and you have a lot to juggle. How do you manage the social consciousness for Warner Brothers?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you stay grounded because you have conversations. I mean, I know people, this is a great question in that when I go speak to students often, they're like, how do you ensure you don't sell your soul once you get into a big company? And what I always remind folks is that when a company is as large as Warner Brothers, Coca-Cola and such, it's because over time, they were a small company that scaled into a large one. And I think what often happens is as you grow, there are more people that you have to get the buy-in, get people on board. There's a little bit more red tape because there's more to lose, right? There's a lot of sort of legal HR hurdles that you have to work through. In the public eye, I think that often people see that as they're not being intentional, or this is not a good campaign. But I think people don't realize how much work goes into just landing on one decision that's made about one campaign among a million, right? So it's a lot of coordination, but I think going back to your question about consciousness, I think it's in that sort of deliberate focus. Like, I think oftentimes people who kind of dabble in this philanthropic or CSR space, they're like, oh, by the way, we raised money and that equated to X number of meals. And I'm like, well, is that what you set out to do? When you had that conversation with the nonprofit, did you say in partnering with you, I understand that these are your gaps or needs as your funder, supporter, whatever you want to call it, this is what I want to offer you. How does that work? And I think if we're not willing to have sort of that two-way conversation, see our stakeholders as thought partners and not just recipients of our funds, I think that's when you really understand the issues that face our society and come up with solutions that make sense for the business that you're in.
Nijha, why don't I kind of reverse that? As the nonprofit on the call, what are you seeing that the corporations are expecting from your organization as you're supporting them?
Transparency is key here. You know, when you think about a brand, and I think that PR is really taking the industry's like center stage around transparency because of social media. I think now it's easier for users to hold brands accountable for their actions, whether, for example, it's a bad review on a blog or a petition circulating on Facebook. You know, the public, I think, is becoming really increasingly influential in shaping companies' reputations. And so I think as a PR professional, it's our duty to ensure that our mission, our message, who we are is and what we stand for is very transparent. I also see that there's, you know, a lot of buzz around and the emphasis around storytelling. So companies are really starting to hone in on what is our story and how we are delivering that to the public. You know, we found that it's a buzzword in communications, and it's something that all organizations, of course, are looking to exceed in. Specifically for nonprofits, storytelling has really holds the potential to be very powerful because of the nature of the business. It's really about connecting your audience on more of that human interest, emotional level. And I think between the two, it really creates kind of a foundation of the connection between the organization and the public.
Yeah, we have a acronym for that. We call it an ART. It should be authentic, responsible, and transparent. Every campaign that you're working on. Another question from Kimberly Alexander from Quinnipiac University is how important it is for a company to stay focused on one social initiative, or at least remain the same in category. And it goes in that you don't want to water down by sponsoring everything and partnering with everybody. How do you kind of focus on what that mission and narrative is so that I don't know whether for either of the brands here, that you kind of own something, the space that, Warner Brothers or an HBO would be known for X. Coke really wants to be known for Y. How would you address that? Sally, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because I think that kind of marks the evolution of our CSR program. I think initially it's sort of because we're in the community seen as a high influencer, everybody approaches us and says, we need funding, we need support, and everybody has a worthwhile cause. And so I think over the years, we've decided when we look at kind of the value chain of our business, all of our stakeholders, our lane is really the creative economy, right? So it's like, how are we creating a pipeline where more people have access into our industry for jobs, for the experience or whatnot. And along with that, it's like we need to be in the arts. We need to invest in education because that's going to be the future. And so I think a lot of our programming is around how do we develop kind of the next generation of filmmakers, writers, and making sure that our workshops, writers' rooms, or whatnot are becoming more accessible to those. With that said, I occupy the community engagement space, and I think some folks, and I'm not discounting that this is a valid approach, but oftentimes when folks come to me, they're like, we love your arts program, we think it's great, but we have a number of students that don't know where their next meal is coming from. They don't have a backpack for school. Can you provide support? And my attitude is sort of, it has to be a holistic approach at some point, right? It's like, yes, we can continue with the arts program so that you have the supplies to become an artist. But if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, shame on me for turning a blind eye to that issue. And so I think to the extent that you can look at the issue holistically, but identify where you think you can have the most impact and benefit to the person on the other side, I think that's sort of the best way to kind of look at it.
Cool. Debbie?
Yeah.
I would say that when you look at the spaces that we occupy as it pertains to this specific topic, it's spaces that are tied to the business, right? So, one example is sustainability. We're doing a lot of heavy lifting as it pertains to sustainability to ensure that we also leave the planet better. So this includes partnerships with, with NGOs, having conversations with NGOs, having conversations with government, ensuring that, scientists, et cetera, are working through these problems together. But, sorry, this is the joint office situation. But I think, so there's one thing, but I think also within the communities and the supply chain, just ensuring that, within that supply chain that we're doing good. It's not just merely we're hiring, right? It's ensuring that we're ensuring job training, right? Reskilling people, upskilling people. There's really just a gamut that we touch, but it has to be integrated into the business to ensure that we have a vested interest and that we're not just, to Sally's point, just picking and choosing based on, a preference that I may have. But I think you'll see buckets, right, within major companies, buckets of focus. So within Coca-Cola, sustainability is a big focus, but sustainability could also mean sustainability within the job force, right? It could mean, it could also mean and articulate itself and manifest itself in different ways as it pertains to sustainability. But we have an empowerment program. We also have, a lot of programs as it pertains to diversity and inclusion. So I think a clear strategy is an important one because it's really easy because there's a lot of people and a lot of spaces and places that need help. And unless you focus, it would be easy to give a little here and there, but not have the impact that we'd hope to get in terms of making a difference. So not sure, Scott, if that answers your question, but I think it focus is important. And I would say that at Coke specifically, focus, in addition to ensuring that it's tied to the business, allows us the highest probability of success.
Well, and it's an easier story to tell, I think, to your publics if it's within the business model instead of doing something that's totally contrary to what you do. Nijha, anything you'd like to add here?
I don't have any additions.
Right, then I'm going to go to the next question. Ricardo Cotto, Sacramento State University, is what happens if fighting for a social cause pushes away a loyal base of your publics who might not agree with your campaign? You know, those are the challenges sometimes when a brand does take on an issue. Have anybody experienced anything that they've kind of seen challenges in this area?
I would say, Scott, that in this space, oftentimes having tough conversations like that are important to understand exactly if a viewpoint is being myopic, et cetera. So I would say that, in a lot of conversations that we have, it's not with just people that love us and say, oh, great job. It's also the difficult conversations with folks that, with NGOs, an example, right? Difficult conversations where they're pushing us and consumers are pushing us across a myriad of topics. So I would say that oftentimes, a company, there's going to be missteps. We're not perfect. And I would say that, at the Coca-Cola company, the CEO now says that it's okay, fail fast, continue to learn, continue to iterate and learn from it. And I would say that across the organization, we know that we want to do good, but at the same time, we also know that we have to keep pushing ourselves and having those conversations with people that aren't like-minded like us in terms of, thinking that said solution is the only solution, because oftentimes it isn't the only solution, but the realities of the time and place often dictate what, the approach, and then you have to continue iterating to ensure that, those things that you're doing in the communities are really making an impact. So sustainability could look really different, in the US versus Japan, as an example. Recycling rates are much different. So the approach is going to be much different. So for me to have a blanket approach in communicating that sustainability is X would be a very difficult thing for somebody in a different part of the world to say, oh, that's authentic or that's true, right? So I would say it's just, I think just having those difficult conversations to ensure where the gaps are. But, I think I would be open to hear what everyone else says, but I think in this space, oftentimes people think, oh, it's just about doing good, which is a good part, but it's also about having those conversations with people that don't agree with you so that you can continue to build your brain and continue to learn and continue to make the work better.
That makes sense. Sally?
Yeah, Debbie, I was going to say you're spot on. I think the reminder here is that like 9 or 8 years ago, we were working on our CSR website and we're like, are we going to have a blog? Right? And are we going to allow our CEO to speak publicly, use social media? And it was met with so much resistance. Fast forward, here we are in 2020 when the office of the president has their own Twitter handle and can talk about anything. And so I think in just that short amount of time, we've had to evolve and recognize that our audience, consumers, want to hear what you care about, what you stand for. And I think Debbie's exactly right in that we have to embrace that shift. I think companies have been notoriously scared to take any specific position on any issue because you don't want it to be polarizing or to sort of shun away anybody in your audience. But I think that will change. And I know internally, especially over the summer, as we were having conversations about, defunding police, what does it mean to shift philanthropic dollars to communities that really needed it, right? For a company like AT&T, Warner Media, that might not have necessarily been on the same page of these issues, we had to come together and say, well, where do we stand? Where can we find consensus? And I think you're going to see iterations of that over the next several weeks, months, as we all try to figure out how to kind of appeal to our internal constituents and those externally who want to hear from us.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Nijha, another question here comes from Royal A's from Arizona State University. With rising use of social influencers in marketing and PR, how can they be valuable ambassadors for social impact? How would you say it? Because I know Smile Train works with a lot of ambassadors.
Yes. So social ambassadors, even to take a step back, when we think about how do we connect with our target audiences? And so Smile Train does a really great job about working with various ranges in terms of genres, whether it's athletes, models. We have a great partnership with the Miss Universe organization that really touches globally across all of our footprint, being that Smile Train it works in 90 countries around the world. And the importance, and really celebrities, as we know, they have a huge impact on an individual brand, where social media ties in, celebrity ties in to really how you boost morale and generate awareness for a brand. So we definitely pick and choose celebrities where we have synergies between some of the work that they do and how it really ties in and it fits well with our brand. We leverage them for social media campaigns, where we get lots of traction around that. And what we find is that the folks that really partner with us are genuinely want to be and believe in our cause. So we find that they become spokespeople during their own ventures, where they actually speak to Smile Train and their work with us.
And I've got to assume, whether paid or related to content, that both Coke and Warner Brothers have done a lot with influencers. Can you stay specific, though, towards a social impact campaign that you saw was real successful because a social influencer was involved? Sally?
I can speak to one. So, all of the entertainment industries, like, we've rallied around the issue of sort of youth related smoking. And I think there's this idea that, if you typically see a star on one of our films smoking, it may encourage the negative behavior, which is to pick it up because it looks cool. So for a while we had this sort of antiquated PSA that preceded all of our films that might have featured smoking. And I thought, there has to be a better way to market to our peers. And, we had two projects going, one where we allowed youth filmmakers to come up with the content to really resonate from a peer-to-peer marketing standpoint, to encourage others not to pick up the habit, or if you had, how to stop and why you should care. And so that was really great, because we had some of our kind of top filmmakers, producers kind of weigh in as judges and really help kind of amplify that project. Separately, we reach out to social influencers, and that list shifts every week or maybe even every day. But at the time, there were a few influencers that I think really understood kind of the youth voice. And it was really working through them to use humor, to use drama, whatever it might be, to kind of talk about this issue. Because if you watch our old PSA, it's pretty embarrassing. It's sort of like, these are the harmful effects of smoking, right? Like a robotic voice. And you're like, yeah. No youth is going to watch that PSA and be moved to make some behavioral change. So I think, it's like, how do we leverage people, influencers that the youth or your audience are willing to listen to? Because to all of our collective point, it's about authenticity and relatability.
Makes a lot of sense. Debbie?
Yeah, a good segue into that is actually I've seen a lot of partners, whether that's celebrities or influencers, also asking what we're doing. What, as we think about sustainability as an example, if we were to be, engaging with a celebrity, I've had multiple briefings where we walk them through our sustainability plan, and we walk them and answer their questions to understand, so they understand where we're at. Because I think what happens, and I don't think people understand, it's not like these two things are separate. Like the influencer, like when you join to connect about a purpose and these things, what often happens is you're tied together. And I think there's a vested interest to ensure that there's an authenticity to it, and that you guys are communicating the same thing and you have the same values. And I would say that more than ever, what I'm seeing is that folks are having that conversation before even the paper is signed.
Makes a lot of sense. What we've seen with influencers too, we've surveyed a bunch of nonprofit organizations, and what we found is that with a really authentic influencer, more than 38% of followers of that influencer will make donations or volunteer. So it's very powerful statistics to see the impact of an influencer. We have about 15 minutes left, and what I'd like to do is kind of pivot now more to how you got your careers and how advice that we could present to the students listening today about how to get a career in public relations and social impact. Got a two-part question here. Megan Albers from University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Would a public relations major be qualified for a job related to corporate social responsibility? And then Millie Rodriguez from University of Southern California, what classes and or skills would you recommend to have when applying for these type of jobs? So I kind of see those two going together. Why don't we start with Nijha?
Those were really great questions, and I might switch it up. I mean, provide the content that you need, but I might tell a little bit about my own personal story a little bit, just to, as I feel like it's very unique. And I remember the times of
all
being
of your stories are unique, actually. And it only sorry to cut you off is because I know each of your stories. Please share them because it's such a great path. Go ahead, Nijha.
Sure. I think that my story really resonates for many of you. You know, the jitters around, you know, whether it's almost time for graduation or you just started in the field of getting on board studying PR. There could be the uncertainty, right? Especially now during COVID, everyone's like, well, how will I be able to get a job? Will there be opportunities? What should I be doing extra to put myself, you know, ahead of the game? And so, crazy enough, I will say this, I actually originally started when I went to college studying pre-med. I had these big dreams of wanting to be an orthopedic surgeon. And little did I know, after being pre-med track for about 1.5 to 2 years of college, I switched my major. I said, you know what, I'm going to switch into something that I thought really at the time really matched my personality. Of course, the folks on the panel, I think, have gotten a sense of my personality, but I'm really outgoing. I'm energetic, and I just felt like communications were for me. This was my, you know, 17, 18-year-old self saying that. So I'm going to go into communications. So after the switch, I actually really loved it. I started and I actually landed my first internship. I did an internship with BET, working at the 2006 BET Awards. I landed another internship for the Virginia Department of Transportation, where really kickstarted my career. Those are definitely two different industries, but this is the time now for you to really get your feet wet. Learn as much as you can. A lot of things that you will learn in college, you'll say, there's no use for it outside of college. But I think that getting the experience of internship plays a key role. I started my first job in Virginia, and a couple of months later, I ended up moving to New York City, where I reside now. So I'm just saying this to say that what you're studying now, what you think you want to do now, your interest levels may really change by the time you complete college. But some of the advice I have, and then I'll definitely pass it over because I could go on and on. This is like my bread and butter, which I love to talk to folks about, is the importance of building relationships. I know Debbie, I think, mentioned, and Sally mentioned this earlier on, about who you know, how you manage your relationships, how you treat others are far more important factors than what you do. I really feel that having those collaborative relationships will really open up doors to new contacts, conversations, and opportunities. Now we're like, okay, COVID hit. So what do? Network online. You know, the traditional ways of face-to-face meetings are just not happening right now. You know, find other ways to connect. There's dozens of LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups for both nonprofit and for profit, for professionals to network and to find jobs. Be open to taking informational meetings to learn more about an organization. It really helps to build relationships with some of the key stakeholders at that organization, and to just open your mind up a bit more about the industry. And before I pass it over, I really encourage everybody on this call today to apply for internships, to get that experience. Don't wait until graduation to start applying. Like, apply now, and I mean it, apply now. It's very important to just open your horizon. I come from a background of agency life for a little over 10 to 11 years of working entertainment and lifestyle. And here I am working in nonprofit. So needless to say, and then I'll be quiet, just to keep your mind open to trying new things and really, really build on the importance of cultivating key relationships in this industry. It's very important.
Great feedback, Nijha. Thank you. Sally.
Great advice, Nijha. I echo everything she says. I mean, I think, and I'm going to appeal to folks that might be a little bit more shy or introverted. I mean, I graduated right after 9/11. I was like, oh God, I'm never going to work again. And I think at the age, everything feels permanent, right? It's like, this is going to be it for the rest of your life. And it's not, right? Our life happens in seasons. So hopefully that provides some comfort while it does feel and maybe look bleak that, people are still hiring. They will hire again. It's just, we're all having to kind of contend with the unknown right now. What you do know is your story. You do know and you're figuring out like what it is that you want to do. So be very intentional about who you reach out to. I used to hate networking because I'm like, oh, I don't want to sell myself. No, I mean, like, I don't want to come up with my elevator pitch. It felt so foreign to me. But I think when I reframed the narrative that it was, I'm looking for people who are either like-minded, who care about what I care about, have the experience where I do not. And I just want to learn from them, and sort of demystified and brought down the walls for me. And it was sort of like, okay, I want to just learn about their story. And inevitably, anyone you talk to, you're going to connect on one solid point. And that's the name of, right, the game in relationships. And you can take two different approaches. I always say there are people who are all about the numbers. They have like 1 million Facebook friends or something, which is cool, right? You talk to everybody and you hope you find something that you're looking for. Or if you're like me, you find a group of folks. So if I'm interested in CSR, I'd go on LinkedIn, type anyone who has CSR in their title and say, you know what, they look like they have a cool job. Maybe they'll connect with me. You develop a relationship and you'll find, I think, organically mentors, sponsors, whatnot through that. You just have to figure out what you're comfortable with, what you're willing to accept, and how much you're willing to put yourself out there, knowing that it's not defined for any of us. I've had a linear career in CSR, which is unheard of. And I'm an old timer here because I've been doing this for 20 years. But I was like a sophomore in college, thought I wanted to be an accountant, clearly was not good at that, even, and probably breaks that stereotypes that Asians are good at math. But I took a chance. I decided to go for an internship, and like Paramount offered me $8 an hour. Disney offered $16 an hour. It kind of seemed to make sense from a financial perspective, but you never know, right? Like, and I think initially I started off, I'm like, what am I doing working in supply chain management compliance at the age of 19, right? Looking at labor standards. It's not what I studied. And maybe that part of the work wasn't fulfilling, but man, in my 20s, I got to travel all across the US to learn about our different businesses, from cruise lines to our country music label to Broadway. And I think because I was open to the experience and learning and just really being a sponge and just acquiring as much of it as possible, my narrative was formulated through that. I was like, you know what I like? So I like talking to people. I like figuring out how we can create wins. I love making sure that people are serviced who've been down and out and ignored by the system. And that has developed into a 20-year career in CSR. And you couldn't have told me at 5 that this is what I'd be doing. But yeah, I've loved every season, even though not all seasons are easy.
So what would you recommend to, I think you took some grad school classes as well. afterwards?
Yes. I've left that out. So when I was in school, and I went to get my MBA after working for about 5-7 years, and they didn't have like social impact classes, right? You had that like one business ethics class. So I'm proud to say that, you know, there are actual master's programs. One at my alma mater, USC, they have a master's of social entrepreneurship, where in lieu of an MBA, you can get a master's program that focuses squarely on social impact, and you get to learn about different cases from across the globe. So you become very intimately familiar with social issues and the different lens depending on your sort of geographic location. And I think if you're looking for more of that grounding, there is that. There are certification programs all across at major universities. There are organizations, nonprofits that offer them. So my advice is don't get stuck on any one key job search. Just keep trying a little iteration of everything and see what pops up and see what you naturally gravitate towards. Because I do believe in that sort of idea of attraction, and then finding folks that have the path that you want, because they'll know like 5 or 10 resources that will be helpful to you, and it will be practical and not just theoretical. Awesome.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Sally. Debbie.
One thing I heard from both Sally and Nijha is curiosity, and I'm big on curiosity. Curiosity, especially in PR, is your superpower, because you are just like learning as much as you can, and you're able to connect the dots in such a wonderful way that others may not be able to, just because they don't have that visibility you may have. So would PR be a good, major? Yes, but I also say that there's a lot of different majors that would go really well with this specific space. I'd say also, in terms of networking, I, like Sally, was not the biggest fan of networking when I first, got out of college, just because I wanted to ensure that I had value and I was authentic. And sometimes when this is relatively new, you're a little rusty, you're trying to figure out what questions to ask and all those things. But it does get better. But what I say is that if you are hesitant because of whatever reason, is what helped me is providing value to whomever I'm networking with. So an example is LinkedIn, right? So we click that LinkedIn all day, every day, and then we have a bazillion friends. But how can you stand out? Always provide more value, and that will make you stand out. So in a LinkedIn connection, I learned this this advice was given to me very early in my career, but when I'm linking in with somebody, I often share something that they worked on, or I share an article that would be pertinent to them. Again, going an extra step, people notice. So I think any place that you can show that, I think will be really impactful. In terms of my career, I also did not know I'd be working here. So I grew up in the Philippines, and then my, Asian kind of upbringing, I think they only thought I would go into medicine or be a lawyer. To this day, they still ask if I'm going to be a lawyer, because I don't think they knew what communications is. I think it's not that they hate it or anything. It's just, I think oftentimes our families put on us the things that they think would be good for us, not necessarily, that they would disagree with the choices that we had. So very similar to Nijha, a lot of my summers actually were spent in the lab, because I thought I would change the world by finding a new drug and cure something. But similar to Sally, the long days in the lab made me miss human interaction. And then I looked at potential undergraduate degrees that would work well with law. PR was one of them. And then I went into PR. And then really, really enjoyed it, and had a ton of different internships spanning across different industries, from motorsports and automotive to CPG to pharma. But all to say, all those things were really important, because I thought it was a disservice to me if I didn't stay in a specific space. But what it has illuminated now in retrospect is that it's allowed me to think more critically about things that others may not be thinking critically about. But ultimately, I would say that just keep that curiosity flame, because that will serve you well in your career, even personally, because I think things will always be fresh to you. So don't lose that sense of curiosity is my piece of advice.
Debbie, thank you. And Kay, right before you cut us all off, just 2 tips related to what has been shared here with everybody. Number 1 is a great Wayne Gretzky quote: "If you don't take a shot on goal, you won't make it." So I encourage all of you to take the risk and reach out to people. Informational interviews are great. And to add on to what Nijha said, is when you're in an informational interview, there's no threat to the person you're interviewing. It's really just getting to know them and their industry. If they like you, they might have a job for you. They may ask you to stay in touch with them and find you a job later. Or because they know their industry, they know other people that they can refer you to. So I encourage you to start doing that, and don't be afraid to take an internship. I know coming out of school, everybody wants that full-time job, but today an internship gets you in the door and look at brands that you really want to work for. And speaking of great brands, I'll wrap up here, is that you have 3 great speakers here, and that I encourage all of you to link in with them, follow up any additional questions that you weren't able to get answers to in today's workshop. I encourage you to reach out. Everybody has agreed to participate with you. So, mention the Broom Center. That will get everybody's attention. And I encourage you, somebody like myself, I'll review resumes. I'll work with you. I love working with students. I've been doing this with the Broom Center for a couple of years and working with different universities, and it's my pleasure to do so. And with that said, Debbie, Sally, and Nijha, thank you for all your time and great insight. And Kay, I turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Oh my gosh, I am so energized about the future of public relations now. Special thanks to our moderator, Scott Pansky, who created this 3P series with us at the Broom Center. And of course, our panelists were fantastic. Debbie, I'm so glad you're not a lawyer. We need you here in PR making all these great decisions for fantastic brands that you've been through. And to everybody, I really appreciate you taking your time, Sally and Nijha, to come with us today. But really, it was the questions from the viewers that made today special. I can see an entire generation of stewards as you head into hit the workforce. So I'm very appreciative of that. So we had our little Broom Center fundraiser, and Quinnipiac was the school that has the most attendees here at the webinar today. Congratulations. I'm going to be in touch with your PRSSA chapter president and your advisor to give you guys a little bit more cash for the coffers. So congratulations, and we are thrilled as the Broom Center to invest in you and to help boost your opportunities. We also decided to go ahead and sponsor some PRSSA memberships for several students who attended today who are not currently members. So I'm probably not going to be really good with names because I don't know you. I'll apologize in advance. From Indiana University of Pennsylvania, we have Mariama Mansoray. From Hampton University, we have Zaire Hagens-Jackson. From Sacramento State, so just up the road from us, quite a ways, we have Felicia Watkins. And then also from Hampton University, we have Kiara Davis. So congratulations to all of you. I'll be in touch via email. So make sure I'm not going to your junk filter, right? This webinar was exactly the type of amazing benefit that you get as a part of being in PRSSA. And I know about half of you aren't in PRSSA. So why not? Let's fix that. PRSSA is currently offering 25% off of their national dues through the end of the year, through December 31st. And so that brings their national dues down to $41.25. So go ahead and contact your PRSSA chapter president or membership chair to find out more about that. And finally, like any PR event, we want to know how we did. When you guys get a survey from the webinar, when you close this out, please fill it out so that we can measure how today went. And if you can think of anything else that the Broom Center can do for you or invest in for you, then please let me know. We know that you're out there working hard, and we know that an investment in you is an investment in the entire public relations community. So thank you so much for your time today, and have a great winter break. Take care.
Take care, everyone.